kind of plug back in to the conversation. So for anyone that's joining us live on YouTube, welcome back. I did just hear that it's possible that you're only seeing Mercedes and Elena on your screen, which to me sounds fabulous, but there's a lot of other beautiful humans inside and out that are with us today. So I'm assuming that that will get itself worked out. So let's get back into it with introductions again for people that are just tuning in. And then a couple things that I wanted to mention is that there will be a link for the Vermont wealth redistribution project that will be circulating in the chat. So people can definitely check that out and know that that's a really potent and incredible and powerful project that's happening and making a major difference in people's lives. And then also there is a city council meeting tomorrow in Burlington. I don't know what time those start, but I'm sure someone does. Okay, so Jabari and Jack are now on the screen as well. So Jabari, if we can start with you. Actually, I don't mean that. Wilda, if it works for you to introduce yourself as we get back, pick up the conversation, that would be great. And also to let it be known that each one of the folks that are in this conversation was chosen with a lot of love and intention, and something that Katerina mentioned earlier. They said, you know, the path of love has led me to be in this space with each of you today, and that felt worth repeating.
I'm Wilda White. I'm a mad rights activist coming from you from Poultney, Vermont. That's all I want to say about myself.
Feel free to just go for it.
Hi, my name's Elena, and I'm living in Montpelier, Vermont. I spent about a decade in Burlington. My pronouns are she, her.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mariah Hightower. I'm a Ward 1 representative here in Burlington, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hello, my name is Jabari Jones. I go by they, them pronouns. I'm living here in Burlington, past 4 years. And I guess I'd say I'm on the path of radical Dharma to abolish racism, and in general on the path of abolition. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jack Hansen. I'm the city councilor for the East District in Burlington. And I've been here in Burlington on and off for about 8 years now. And a lot of my activism and work has focused on climate justice.
And I'm Mercedes Mack. I'm the daughter of Billy Miles and Bobby Mack, granddaughter of Aretha and Lefty and Emery and Mr. Mack. So I use she, her pronouns. I had the confusing blessing of growing up in Burlington, Vermont. And I'm joining you all from Atlanta, Georgia, home of the red clay and my people, and I'm very blessed to be here. So we were on the topic of trust, and I had asked the question, you know, what does trust mean to you? How do you know when trust is present? Where does it live somatically in your body? Elena, you had shared some really, for me, like on point on it, I'm with it, about the small groups of people that by any means necessary, when someone in the community or the group is experiencing harm, whatever it is that needs to be done to remove that source of harm happens. And also we were talking about being armed, small groups of people being armed. And I was sharing that in Atlanta, I have witnessed that happening. And then Soraya, you were talking about the experience of, or the kind of reflection of trust in institutions, and trust happening when you can have a full authentic expression of yourself. Is that correct? And that in institutions you haven't necessarily had that experience. And I said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, because in my mind, institutions and trust don't go together. They just don't go together. That's just me. So Jack or Wilda, Jabari, you know, I think that, and that comes up a lot. We're talking about defunding police. Some people trust the police. Some people trust that that's where the safety comes from, that we outsource it to those folks over there to have safety and trust in our communities. So because of the intentionality and the intentionality in like a container of love that all of you have been chosen, and it's really potent what you have to share, your insights from your lived experience, from your heart and your mind, about what trust and safety mean to you when you know it's present.
Thank you for that. I was thinking about your question, where does trust live? Where does trust live in my body? And I think for me, a trust is on my skin. And skin represents and is a boundary. And it's a permeable boundary. But it defines like what's me and what isn't me, but also connects me to the world at the same time. So I think trust is built on boundaries, it's built with boundaries. It's like, what are my needs? Where are my needs being met? Where are they not being met? What is, in a way, reaching across those boundaries or trying to extract something from me, you know, without my consent. So trust is on that, on the skin, it's on the boundary. It's about respect, right? It's about consent. And knowing, like, what are my needs? Okay, are my needs being met? Asking those questions, being really aware of that and what is going on. Because I think in many ways, this society has very overt, but also very covert or implicit ways of violating our safety, of manufacturing our consent. And that goes back to, I think, the points made about representative democracy. Yeah, that's what comes to mind.
Thanks everyone for sharing. It took me a while to reflect on it and think about it. I think for me, trust has a lot to do with motivation. So like, what is a person's motivation? What are they motivated by? or an institution. What is an institution motivated to do? That has a lot to do with trust for me. I think trying to understand what those motivations are, whether it's the economic system, looking at the motivations around profit, around growth, looking at the motivations around policing, around like control, around perceived order, or whether it's looking at individuals and are they motivated by, are they motivated by, you know, their own position and where they stand in society? Are they motivated by something larger than themselves, something outside of themselves? Just understanding what the motivations of people and systems are, to me, like really ties into the level in which I can feel like I can trust that.
Yeah, that presents like a huge disconnect for me from the concept of trust. I would say, like, identifying people's motivations in my experience is usually pretty easy. Or I guess, well, in some cases it's not, but for the most part, people seem to be motivated by survival. Some people are privileged enough to be able to be motivated for the desire to thrive because survival has already been met. Many of us exist in situations where we act and operate completely on instinct, and therefore our actions look, feel, and sound that way. And a lot of people who base, as you said, their ability to trust other people on what they perceive their motivations to be are very distrusting of people for some reason, who act on instinct and are motivated by survival, are motivated by, I guess, if you want to call it baser instincts. The distrusts, it creates a feedback loop where opportunities become less present, trust within community becomes less present, trust from institutions becomes less present, and that withholding of trust is a form of capital, unfortunately. And when you have that power vacuum, when you have that feedback loop where the capital continues to get amassed in some places and is not distributed equally to people, those who are without trust similarly will continue to have less trust, while those who do continue to have more. I'm not like personally trying to like call you out for that by any means. I think that you have an accurate view of how a lot of people allocate their trust, and it can present some unfortunate results. I guess I'll follow up on that. So when it comes to like where trust lives in the body, I'm not entirely certain what that means. I'm not versed in these kind of dialogues, but I can say that trust in the body definitely share a relationship to our concept and the institution of policing, where people expect, because of how we structure our society, we vote, I guess, or we agree on some level, and we have for centuries, that a policing force, an armed force, should exist to enforce the laws to protect whatever it might be that we're doing as an organized society, protecting property, protecting particular classes, whatever your analysis of that is not really relevant that much. what is relevant is that we give the power to a group of people to do with other people's bodies as they choose. I've had my body forced, hit, slammed, sprayed, tased, locked up. I've had this treatment by the police, and I obviously didn't consent to any of it. As long as we as a society continue to have this force present, then these things will happen. Somebody's consent will be violated. Many people's consent will be violated as long as this force exists. Now, you can try to reform that force as much as you want. You can try to put limits on who they're allowed to do this to, and where and why and how and to what degree. But the fact that they exist means that they're going to continue doing it. So if you have a body like mine, it so happens that like, and we can see this, that I'm going to be treated with more scrutiny than someone else whose body might not look like mine. I don't see necessarily at any point how a reform of any kind, nothing short of abolishment, is going to stop that from happening. I see reforms, I think that demilitarization and defunding are ultimately good things on the right path, but ultimately, we're just probably going to end up changing who it's okay to do this to. The fundamental question is it okay? And if the answer is yes, why? And I personally don't think that the answer to that question is yes. I do not think that it's okay. I think that it is wrong. And I think that we as a community have opportunities right now to, in no ambiguous terms, unambiguously start talking about where the shortcomings are in the community itself that make police necessary for them to feel trust, for them to feel safe. Why do your neighbors scare you so fucking much?
I'm just over here like, And also, I would love to, you let me know if it's okay. Will, I'd love to hear from you. Period. I was just gonna fill up the space with some other stuff, but I'm doing a thing in my life where I don't do that anymore.
All right, so Mercedes, repeat your question again, because I want to be succinct. And
gorgeous. So, well, one, the question doesn't matter. You can say whatever you want to. Your words are gold, and our ears need to hear them. So whatever you want to say is what I want to hear. But the question was around trust. But as we're having the conversation, I'm kind of like being pulled back in time to some work that I did in the Burlington School District and the Diversity and Equity Office, and just the talking. We just did a lot of talking. And so I think that just to kind of move the conversation in a new direction, and maybe to have more words directly on how defunding the police in Burlington is going to happen. In these conversations, like this exact one that we're having now, you know, what is the role of trust for you? Are you at a point in your life where you feel like, you know, I really need to trust XYZ person before I work with them? Or are you just like ready to defund it? This is what I have to say about it. And let's move into action in a decolonized way, et cetera, et cetera.
well, I think personally for me, I only trust when the risk of when the risk of trusting is low. So I think as I go through my life, I'm actually motivated a lot by self-preservation. And as a Black woman, lesbian, psychiatrically labeled person, it's not in my best interest to do a whole lot of trusting. So if I do trust, it's because the risk is low. So, but I also don't want to be, I don't live in fear, or if I am fearful, I don't allow it to stop me from doing anything. And what I try to do is to work with people in a way and do it in a way that I can protect myself. So, because I do feel like to do this work, to create the kind of world that I want to live in, I do need to work with other people. And so I try to do that in a way that I can protect myself, because I'm all about self-preservation. So I think that's as much as I certainly agree with many of the things that people have said here about the problems they have with trust. And I just try to make sure that I'm not the problem with I want to live as freely as possible, and I don't want my own fears of lack of trust to hold me back. So I try to manage my fear and manage my lack of trust in a way that protects me, but moves forward my vision.
Manage your lack of trust in a way that protects you and moves forward your vision.
Right. So, I mean, if somebody, if people promise me things, say things, I'll believe it if the risk of believing them is low. But if people tell me things and the risk of believing them is high, I will investigate myself. If people want to work with me and I'm not exactly sure if I trust them, I will figure out ways to protect myself in case they let me down or something. Or it's probably easier, I'm trying to see if there's a concrete example that I can give, but there's probably nothing really comes to mind. It's kind of funny, in our society, we don't really talk about trust. I think I've heard people say that we live in a post-truth society. And I do think that in my most recent experience of people is that lying is acceptable. And it's kind of how we operate. Well, I didn't understand that's how we operated until I was old enough to know better. Actually, I should have known that people lie with impunity, but I didn't know that until very recently in my life. But I don't think we live in a society where truthfulness is valued anymore, if it ever was, but it's certainly not valued now. And so I think that just means you need to be self-protective, but I don't think it means that you need to stop living your life.
As you're speaking, my mind is doing these connections between, at some point, when did we break trust among one another? And then after trust was broken among us, a group of people decided, oh, you know what? Let's get a bunch of people with guns to patrol our spaces because I don't trust you anymore. I don't trust them and I don't trust that. To me, there's a direct connection between the lack of trust and not having truthfulness among us and police. It's because it's they'll do it. We won't build it among ourselves anymore and repair what needs to be repaired and get complete on the past. We'll just have other people do it and they'll do it over there and we won't look. But I'm safe now. That's what's coming up for me when I hear what you say. And, just the work that happens for me in my own body, on my own ground, about trusting people.
May I speak to that? Thank you for bringing that into this space. And thank you also, Wilda, for your beautiful article about the Vermont legislature and the reforms that they tried to pass to, I forget what it was, I don't know, outlaw chokeholds or something like that, and just how it was all image. Speaking of trust, truth, like image, not truth, is what is trusted, especially these days. Like the image of justice, the image of reform, and which I think your article brilliantly illustrated, just like how that works in Vermont. And Mercedes, when you're talking about trust, yes, and groups of people, and how mistrust being in between them, like a gap, and the police filling that gap. Well, let's go back to the history. The police force comes out of directly out of the slave patrols. Why? Because those who position themselves as the owners of slaves, the profiteers off of slavery, and everyone who profited just by living around them, didn't trust enslaved people to just keep being slaves. they didn't trust them to not cut their heads off in the middle of the night and burn all their shit down. So they invented the police force because they didn't trust them to just keep being dehumanized. Exactly. Yeah. They trusted that they would take revenge if they had the chance, and so they invented the police force because of their own mistrust. So
what's really quick, I want to say, the effectiveness of that group of people is so incredible that even now today where I sit, what I wanted to say was, so what was decided is that a group of white men would get guns, but the policing is so intense that I was like, let me not say that. Let me just police myself and not say those words. So thank you for saying what I would like to read or encoded. I don't even know to not say. So continue.
Thank you. And I just before logging into this discussion, I was thinking about the abolitionist Ruth Wilson Gilmore, and the way that she described what's been happening for at least the last 40 years, but I think which can also be applied to the founding of this country, which she called the organized abandonment of vulnerable communities. And that describes neoliberalism, that describes capitalism itself, the way that it organizes the theft of wealth generated by other people, and in turn that organizes those people's vulnerability to calamity, to death, and it's an organized abandonment instead of organized care, organized equity, organized support. And one way I found this illustration. So Moreau, bringing it back to Burlington, Moreau Weinberger has been mayor since 2012. And I found this case that the ACLU of Vermont took on sometime in 2016, and I'll be really, really short. It's in case anybody wants to look it up, Montagno versus Burlington. So Joseph Montagno was a tenant, and along with other tenants, they were calling the police, speaking of trust, and sort of assigning trust to an institution. They called the police for help, for all kinds of assistance. And the police determined that they were calling too frequently, whatever that means. And so over time, they started to just keep track of the number of calls that were coming in, and then classified Montagno as a quote unquote public nuisance. This was then related to city officials who contacted Montagno's landlord without contacting Montagno, contacted Montagno's landlord and said, you need to take remedial action against this tenant who's being a quote unquote public nuisance, or else we, the city, will revoke your occupancy license. And so they basically like deputize the landlord. And so inevitably the landlord evicted Montagno. Montagno was made houseless. And then the ACLU sent a letter about how the city is violating its client's constitutional rights, filed a complaint. The U.S. District Court of Vermont, 2016, city moved to dismiss and failed. The case went forward. And in 2017, the city just settled the lawsuit for $30,000 and changed city ordinances. And so they went through all of this, the police, the city, the landlord, all to abandon this person, right, in an organized way. And for what? For what?
Property value.
Also that yeah, exactly, they wouldn't have to help this person, which would take resources, maybe their resources, to actually say like, okay, what is the help that this person actually needs? Instead of just doing that, they're like, no, we like our resources. We don't feel like sharing. We actually want more resources. And so we need to get this person out of the way because they're taking up our time, our money that we want to do other stuff with. We don't want to use those resources to actually help this person who is calling for help and not alone. Instead, we want to put those resources somewhere else, like in our own pockets, and then treat this person like a nuisance and abandon them, and then go on about our business, our busyness. Like our busyness is not about helping people. It's not about caring about people. It's about hoarding resources in an organized way, using like all the facilities of the state and the law to organize that abandonment. There's so much energy involved in that. You know,
Not passive at all.
not passive at all. It's aggressive and violent.
Yes.
It's not some benign law of nature, force of God or anything. It's like, no, people put some effort into that. That's wild.
I don't understand. Just everything you said, when it comes to democracy or politics or the city council, these are the moments in which, what else do you need to hear? What else is there to say outside of what Jabari just shared and Wilda and Elena's comment on the property value? What else is there to say? That's it. And how things have not transformed in the city of Burlington or anywhere else lets me know who has power and what's being centered. And so it's in these moments where I have, I had to leave the place where I am from and grew up, because that place is not interested, is doing what Jabari's talking about in an organized way to make sure that I'm not thriving. What? This space, this being, that's what you did? That's what's of value to you? Okay. So it becomes exhausting to me to work in spaces that are not about centering Black and brown, Black women specifically, Black femmes specifically, Black people, because there is an intentional, what is that? Like willingly ignorant. That is what I have found of working with people in Burlington. It's a willful ignorance. People know what they're doing. People in the city council know what they're doing. People in the Burlington School District know what they're doing. People in nonprofits in Vermont, networks of them, they know what they're doing. Why would I continue to give my God-given, ancestral given energy to those systems? I don't understand. So I'll just leave that there, and I'll also do a linear time check in which it's 2:40. So we have around 20 minutes left. So what is the the heart gem that is, you were thinking to yourself, having those conversations with yourself in your head, maybe before this, like, oh, I really want to make sure I say this. I really want to make sure I get this thing that I've been thinking about out in the world. So I'll open the space for that.
Yeah, I think that what I wanted to say, I already said prior to kind of going live, but I think it is definitely worth considering. Now, this is not a call to action to anybody. However, it is worth considering that the Minneapolis police precinct that burned down was more of a catalyst for people to start taking seriously the movement for Black lives in the United States than everything that we have done up until this point. That, in a way, I do mean that slightly hyperbolically, because I definitely don't want to downplay the work of like millions of activists, abolitionists, organizers, and so forth throughout this country's history. But it is literally when we threaten capital, it is when we threaten the current mode of production that people care. It is not when we lose another Black life that people start to care. If every time a police officer killed an unarmed Black person, like anybody, one of them died too, we'd see that shit go down 100%. And I don't want to live in a world where we're at war with the police necessarily. However, what I've been seeing and what I've been viewing has made me take a drastic change in position when it comes to the concept of violence. Who is allowed to wield it, who dispenses the very concept of justice. And a lot of this is fucking corrupted. It down to its very core. We're not seeing justice, but we can. And I think it would be great if, at the very least, more people grappled with that concept and understood that there's no reason why only one type of violence should be seen as acceptable. Police violence is something that we all collectively agree to. Individual violence, on the other hand, is something that we abhor. It doesn't need to be individual. It can be collective. It can be the people enacting their will through the only means that seems to have an outcome that produces change. And if there's anybody who ends up watching this who's in a position of power, I would like to invite you to meditate on that. Because if the current exchange of any kind of capital, be it social or actual like means of production or money, if the mode of production continues to amass wealth in the hands of a few and makes more precarity for the people, there are going to be more people who think the way that I do about it. I'll take it either way. There are people like me out there. If we want to go back to the concept of trust, something that makes it really easy for me to trust someone is when they've got nothing left to lose because they're in a completely similar position to me. Let's make less Elena Littlebugs. Or more.
I will step in and say what I want to say, but I feel like what you said, Elena, shouldn't go like responded to. I think of myself as pretty passive, and I'm not really in favor of violence, but I do agree with your observation that violence does seem to spur change. I don't feel like I could engage in violence in order to spur change. But I do feel like it does seem to spur change. But I don't think it really spurs the kind of change that we want, because I don't feel that people who are responding to the violence are caring any more about Black lives. What they're caring more about are protecting their own hide. And that's not the kind of world I want to live in. I would prefer that people care more about all lives. That would include Black lives. And so I'm not suggesting, I feel like, the other thing is, what I say is, there's no one single strategy that will get us to the world that we want to live in. And so I almost embrace all strategies. And so, I'm not going to elevate one strategy over the other. And I respect anybody involved in this fight for liberation. And the thing that I want to say in this conversation about defunding the police is it is a concern about some of the rhetoric that I've heard that accompanies this call to defund the police. So what I hear people saying is, let's defund the police and put it into like mental health, for example. And my caution to people is this: white supremacy has been extremely successful at preserving itself through transforming itself. And slavery was preserved.
Can you repeat that one for people on the back? Wheel that up.
White supremacy has been very successful at preserving itself by transforming itself. We saw slavery evolve into convict leasing and Jim Crow and mass incarceration. And now with this new call to defund the police and put it into something like mental health, you will see mass incarceration being turned into mass medicalization. And the people who are going to be mass medicalized are going to be those same Black and brown bodies that are mass incarcerated.
Can you share, well, first of all, I'm over here just like in the choir, in the South down here, but like, can you say what you mean by mass medicalization?
I can definitely tell you what that is. That is transforming Black prisoners and brown prisoners into psychiatric patients. And this is already happening. And what's the danger is that people who think of themselves as progressives don't know about the mental health system, because they've bought the ideology that the only people who get labeled with mental health diagnosis are people who are crazy. And it's no more true than that everybody who is in prison is guilty. The prison system and the mental health systems are the same coin, just the flip side. And the people who do law enforcement in the prison system are police, and the people who do rule enforcement in the mental health system are psychiatrists. And so what I want to say to my brothers and sisters is, don't throw people into mental health systems. It is just as racist, just as coercive, just as harmful as the prison system. And anybody who's been in both will tell you, I prefer the prison system, because the mental health system, it results in even greater disenfranchisement than being labeled with being convicted of a crime or having a prison record. So we need to be very, very careful that we don't unwittingly help white supremacy maintain itself by allowing us to just recast prisoners into mental health patients or psychiatric patients and label them and crazy. So, I mean, that's my message to us: is this is really hard what we're trying to do if we want to do it right. It's really easy to do if you just want a quick, superficial, empty gesture solution. And I think what we're seeing now is with these rush to ban chokeholds and these rush to create policies on deadly use of force are really, it's a window dressing, and when people talk about they want to end systemic racism, they want to end racism, most of them don't even know what systemic racism is, and both of them don't even know how to go about doing it. Because in the very breath that they're saying they want to end systemic racism, they're actually perpetuating it. Like this, you've already referred to an article that, an op-ed piece I wrote that was published recently in a couple newspapers and Vermont Digger, where the Vermont legislature purported to want to ban chokeholds and tighten up a deadly use of force policy. But in doing so, they did it in the most undemocratic way. They did it in just a way that was just really a way to pretend like they were doing it without doing it. And we have to be very, very, very analytical and critical thinker. And we have to realize that every institution in our society is infected with racism. Every single one of them. And we cannot willy-nilly say, let's take the money here and put it into here, because when you do that, you're just taking you are just transforming, right? You're preserving. You're not undoing. We need to be dismantling. We need a new vision. We need to re-examine our language. I mean, I'm an alumni of Harvard Business School, and they had us on a conference call. They apologized. The dean of Harvard Business School apologized to Black students for the way that they treated us while they were there. And then some. And then they gave the floor to some Black people who were starting an organization that had 4 principles. One of the principles was 4 values. One of the values was diversity is an asset. And I thought to myself, oh my God, that's just like such colonial thinking. I mean, and this is from a Black person. It's like, no, he was like saying, you know, you need to be nice to us because we're an asset. And I was like, no. No. You need to be nice to me because I am. And we have to really, the language we use, we have to examine. Words like diversity is a white-centric word, right?
Thank you.
Words like equity and inclusion. We don't want to be included. We want to be it, right? And so that's what I wanted to say is this is a great time to be alive. But we can be so susceptible to making the same mistakes, I'm going to call them, as our forebears. As courageous and brave and as much as they suffered, you know, we took the easy way out, right? It wasn't easy, but we call success. We said things were successful when they really weren't. Let's not make that same mistake again. Let's be more patient. Let's be more thoughtful. Let's be more visionary.
Yes.
And let's understand that this is a multi-generational project, right? And whatever we do today is just paving the way for a better world. And we may not live to see it. Certainly, I'm much older than you and I won't. But that's not going to stop me from working towards it. And I want you all to have that same mindset of not accepting these Pyrrhic victories, not accepting these things that on the surface look like victories, but calling it out.
Yes.
Calling it out and saying, no, that's not victory. And the last thing I'll say before I've really used up my time is we have to remember that all Black lives matter, okay? Let's not just let rich Black people, wealthy Black people, cisgendered, straight Black people get the spoils of this tipping point. Let's remember the most marginalized among us. Let's remember our mad brothers and sisters. Let's remember our transgender brothers and sisters. Let's remember all those living on the edge and the margin. So anything you're doing, you need to be asking yourself, how does this affect the most marginalized among us? And let's put them at the center of our activism. Because when we put them at the center, all of our lives improve. And I'll shut up there.
Yeah, that was so great. And I'm just gonna quickly share because I'm an elected official, like I'm supposed to be representing, and I've been working on this resolution, you know, for racial justice. And some of the feedback that I've gotten on it has just been so frustrating, just so incredibly frustrating. And then just in terms of like not understanding, and then some of the things in terms of like, oh, well, this isn't defined. You need to define this. You need to define this. And it's like, I'm sorry. It's like most of the people I've talked to about any of this, like the reason that I'm on city council is because I have so much privilege. Like I'm you know, lighter skinned, which makes me more, I'm like, you know, like Wilda is, I'm Ivy League educated. So all these things that make people more comfortable with who I am. Like I can't unilaterally make decisions about what the process is going to look like and how, like, I don't want to say we're just going to take all this money and assign it to mental health, because I don't know like all the messed up pieces of like the ways that I am indoctrinated into the teaching that the Kool-Aid that I've been drinking for 30 years. And so I think that, like, I'm hoping that Burlington is in the start of a process to be like, this is messed up and we need something else. And I feel like there's a big push to be like, oh, and this is what the something else is. We need to define that now. We need clear answers. And the thing is, I don't know, because I'm part of the paradigm. Like I've gotten the teachings. And yeah, I'm hoping that this will be it can't be a moment, right? It needs to be a long-term discussion about how do we rethink who we are, because we've been told so many narratives that don't come. I know I've been told so many narratives by my own parents about like how I need to show up in the society, and unlearning that takes a long time for me. And there need to be more voices in the room, I think, than the people that are currently accepted in the room.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Wilda. I appreciate everything that was just said.
Thank you.
In this moment, I'm just thinking it seems really straightforward. I mean, take the funds and give them to Black and brown people. What Wilda just said, who to put in the center, you know, Black trans people, Black femmes, Black women, and you watch the whole world transform. I mean, it's not rocket science, y'all. That's why you make me so tired. You make me so tired. It's like, it's not complicated. People love to make it complicated. It's mental masturbation. That's cool. I like to feel good too. Not in that way. I'm done. I'm done with that. But it's really not. And that's why I'm like, that is why I center the people I center. Because when y'all are ready to stop pretending that you don't know, then we can have a conversation. Until then, I'll be on this red clay, evolving and thriving. You know what I'm saying? But it's really not. It's not complicated.
I just want to say one more thing, and just like hallelujah, just so much hallelujah to like everything that's been said, and like something Wilda said, something Zoraya just said. Like I want to recommend a book, because that's kind of what I do. I want to recommend a book to illustrate this history of this Black liberation struggle, how we've tried this and didn't work, how tried that didn't work, and how white supremacy just played its shell game. And yet still like an author that offers solutions. Keeanga Yamada Taylor is just one of our brightest lights, and I highly recommend reading her book, from hashtag Black Lives Matter to Black liberation, from hashtag Black Lives Matter to Black liberation. And she's like, yeah, you know, back in the whatever, like the early 1900s, we tried this and it led to this. And then we tried, you know, during this civil rights movement, we tried this. And then we went into electoral politics and that didn't work, you know. And then we got these mayors who were still in part of the system. And she just like tries it like every step of the way through Black history and the Black liberation struggle, the different tactics that have been used, the different movements, and you know what they were able to accomplish and what they weren't able to accomplish, which was the abolition of white supremacy, ultimately. And then she gives some recommendations like, okay, well, maybe you should try socialism, try a socialist revolution, try burning this shit down. But it's a very intelligent book, and it, I think, would help us, like all of us here on this call and beyond, to both examine like Zaraya was saying, like where we've come from, where we've received the teachings, and what we have been told what works and where we ought to fit in, and then like read this history and say, you know, that's been tried before, and white supremacy is still here. I need to listen to like our ancestors, are the people who came before who's tried it. and just realize, yeah, like exactly, like that, like white supremacy is, this system is incredibly adaptable. You know, reading Howard Zinn's People's History, he illustrates this, like it's like over and over again. It's kind of a dull book because it keeps repeating the same point over and over again. It's like 400 or 500 years. This system's been doing the same thing. It's been adapting and surviving. It destroys or marginalizes the radicals because they know where it's at. And then everyone else, it incorporates them into the system and keeps moving forward. It keeps adapting. It keeps throwing crumbs to just enough people to keep going. Because that's all it knows how to do. Just keep going, you know, until the earth is destroyed. That's his purpose. That's his only purpose. And so we have to learn about, like, we have to learn lessons from the past. Otherwise, we will have no future. So read the book.
I'm always making, so going back to something that Wilda shared before about the medicalization, what I'm seeing right now is a really bizarre time. All of the training I have received on earth is being put to the test every moment of every day to protect and water my mental prosperity. And also, as a Black person, you know, what's interesting is that, well, we are incredibly gifted, and we have, we are plugged into the unseen and the power of the unseen and people that have come before us, and in the systems that are currently centered, having conversations with the unseen makes you crazy. But that's also what has given us the complete power so that those of us that are Black and brown are alive right now. It's not like we just like got through all of that because we know how to make it through a school system or exist in an institution. No. So, but I know a lot of people right now that are, the strangeness of the time right now, the way that time has become fluid and a little wavy, veils are thin, more things are happening, you know, the planet is responding, our ancestors, the curses are kind of coming to a full circle. And I think that there's a lot of, like, I guess, being susceptible to feeling mentally unstable. And so I feel like this time is really producing the possibility for more Black and brown people to end up in, I can't remember what you called it, mental health system. Is that what you called it?
Yeah, that's a danger because when people are responding to what's happening around them, I mean, we're all adapting to racism. We're all trying to survive in the face of racism, and that creates its own challenges, and the behaviors that we may manifest in doing that get labeled mentally ill, and then you get put into a system and given harmful drugs and subjected to harmful practitioners. You know, mental distress is real, but the answer is not getting put into a system, told you're ill, told it's driven by biology. Here, take this medication that is extremely harmful. I mean, psychiatric drugs cause so many ills, you know, increased diabetes, weight gain, other metabolic problems, kidney problems, you know, and that's a real harm. And so we need to take care of ourselves, but the interventions that we use shouldn't be shortening our lives. People who have been labeled with mental illnesses who go through that system, they die 20 years prematurely. I'm trying to save people from that fate, because I don't want people, like right now, because they are under a lot of stress, feeling like the answer is to go into that system and then get wrapped up in that system. And then, you know, once you're labeled with a mental illness, it affects your job prospects, it affects your housing prospects, it affects everything. And so we can be taking care of we should be taking care of our whole body. I don't believe in this mind-body separation, but we should be taking care of our whole selves but not in a way where we are labeling ourselves ill because we are responding to these times. We just want to be well without the labeling, without those harmful interventions. And I think one of the things that we can do personally is make space in our lives for people to talk about the distress instead of being intolerant and saying, if you're distressed, you need to see somebody professional. That's been so harmful. I mean, why can't humans talk to humans? So that's my concern. I mean, is that we don't want to get thrown into a system that's going to make our lives worse, not better.
Beautiful. And so Raya had to jump off to be in the world of learning about the budget. And so I just want to honor her for her time and her presence or her vulnerability and witnessing this experiment together and taking on being on city council. And then boop, boop. Okay, so 306. So let's I don't even know what the word is. Again, English language is a colonial spell. There is no word. I'm just gonna let it, I'm not gonna try to put words to it. So if anyone has any thing they wanna share, lastly, let's do that. And then I'll just close the space and we'll continue dismantling the systems and being fully alive and honoring ourselves.
Yeah, you know, I'd like to add that there are, from my count, a bazillion Black trans women trying to raise funds for inaccessible gender confirming surgeries that are getting some attention on Twitter. And if you go on Twitter and you just type like Black trans GoFundMe, give your money to Black trans women who are trying to get surgeries. You could probably find me on there too. So do it. That's it.
Yes. Thank you. Heard. Yes. Thank you.
Just to follow up on something that Wilda just raised around like creating space for one another to support one another through these challenges, talk about these vulnerabilities, rather than, yeah, again, like similar with policing, like deferring it to this external third party that can take care of it, supposedly take care of it for us, which is obviously completely untrue, and trying to support one another in that way. And that's why, yeah, I just really appreciate opportunities like this to come together and create that intentional space where we can listen to each other and hear each other and speak our truths and open up in a different way. So I appreciate you raising that, Wilda, and I appreciate that we're having some space to do that today.
Katarina, is there anything else you maybe want to add? If so, but I am so thankful for this opportunity to share space with you and to plug into the land that raised me. And I'm so thankful to be in this now moment of eternity with y'all. What a trip, man. What a trip. What a trip. What a trip this is. I'm so thankful for the blessings of my people and the protection that you offer me and the people that I love and the communities that I'm a part of. May you open the road for us and make our way easy and illuminate the path that leads us all to the supreme destiny of liberation, which is beating through our atoms and ourselves. I'm so grateful for y'all, to each and every one of you. Yeah, period. That's it.
Well, thank you, Mercedes, for doing what you did, which you aren't calling facilitation, but you did create a space for all of us to be our full selves here, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
And all of you others, thank you. I love being in this space with you.
Yeah, this is fun. This is really fun. I'm affirmed. I'm jazzed up.
Thank you, Wilda. It was good to hear you speak.
Thank you to all of you. I do need to jump off. I'm on a bunch of deadlines. And I'm celebrating my 62nd birthday today.
Hell yeah!
Happy birthday.
So, thank you.
Woo!
So let me go do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
happy birthday.
To you all. All right, be well.
I love you.
We're so glad you
Thank you.
exist. We're so glad you exist. So important.
Rock, you rock, Wilda.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And Electra and I and our cat want to offer thank you for being love, each of you, and thank you for bringing love, each of you. And if you need anything, or if there's any way that we can be conduits of care and support after this conversation, our cat's trying to scratch the couch, don't do that, that we're around. So I have love for each of you, and thank you for making this possible. And Mercedes, Yensa brought you to me, brought you to us, and we love you.
I love y'all too. Thank you. And I'll talk to y'all later. Elena, I'm just like reading or Jabari, will you message me? I don't know who can hear me, who can't hear me. Essentially, I'm just trying to get Elena's Venmo. So Jabari, if you can message it to me on Instagram, that would be helpful. I love you all. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.